It is the beginning of the month, and therefore we are doing a Path series, and this month I am going to be looking at Gnosticism. And if this is your first time here, welcome. I am Lee Johnson, and here we talk about magic, witchcraft, the occult, demonology, spirituality, all of that stuff. So if that's what you're interested in, stick around. I'm Lee W. Johnson. Don't forget to subscribe or get more on Patreon. Let's start with the historical and cultural context. So, Gnosticism is a complex and diverse religious movement that emerged in the first few centuries of the Common Era as a reaction to the spiritual and philosophical questions of its time. It was deeply rooted in the Hellenistic world, which we spoke about last month actually. This was a period when Greek philosophy, Egyptian mysticism, and Persian dualism, as well as early Christian thought, were intermingling, creating fertile ground for new religious ideas. Gnosticism can be understood as part of this larger context of religious innovation, driven by the dilemmas of human suffering, the nature of God, and the purpose of life. The term gnosis comes from the Greek word for knowledge, but it refers specifically to esoteric, experiential knowledge of the divine rather than intellectual understanding. Gnostic thought was concerned with transcending the limitations of the physical world and discovering a hidden ultimate reality. In Gnostic cosmology, this material realm is seen as a false or corrupted creation, the product of a lower, ignorant deity called the Demiurge. Humanity, trapped in this flawed world, holds within it a divine spark, a remnant of a higher spiritual realm, and can be saved by discovering its true nature through gnosis. The Gnostic worldview was influenced by several religious and philosophical traditions. Platonic dualism, which distinguished between the imperfect material world and the perfect realm of forms, provided a conceptual framework for the Gnostic disdain of the physical realm. From Persian Zoroastrianism came the sharp division between good and evil, light and darkness that pervades Gnostic thought. Egyptian religious symbols and myths also shaped Gnostic cosmology, while Jewish mystical traditions contributed the notion of a hidden God beyond the understanding of ordinary believers. Perhaps most crucially, early Christianity itself provided much of the narrative structure and symbolism that Gnosticism adapted to its own ends, often offering an alternative reading of Christian scripture. Gnostic movements, therefore, were not monolithic, and their teachings varied across different groups. Some Gnostic sects, such as the Valentinians and Sethians, emphasized different aspects of cosmology, salvation, and ritual practice. Valentinians, for example, adopted many Christian elements, interpreting the life and teachings of Jesus as a guide to liberation of the soul. Sethians, meanwhile, drew more from Jewish apocalyptic and mystical traditions, seeing their gnosis as a return to a divine state, symbolized by the biblical figure Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. Despite their diversity, all Gnostic sects shared a common emphasis on the pursuit of direct knowledge of the divine, often positioning themselves against the prevailing religious authorities, whether Jewish, pagan, or Christian. The early Gnostic movements flourished alongside the nascent Christian church, but soon found themselves at odds with emerging Christian orthodoxy. Gnostics offered a radical reinterpretation of Christian teachings, often claiming that they possessed the true, hidden meaning of Jesus' words and mission. For them, Christ was not a saviour who died to atone for humanity's sins in the traditional sense, but rather a divine emissary sent to awaken the spark of divine knowledge within each person. Jesus' crucifixion was not the central focus of salvation, as it was in Orthodox Christianity. Rather, it was his role as the revealer of hidden knowledge that mattered most. This theological divergence placed Gnosticism in conflict with the early church, and particularly as the Christian movement began to formalize its doctrines in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Church fathers such as Irenaeus of Lyons, Tertullian, and Hippolytus viewed Gnosticism as a dangerous heresy that threatened the unity of Christian belief. In his work against heresies, Irenaeus launched a comprehensive attack on Gnostic teachings, accusing Gnostics of distorting scripture and rejecting the true faith. One of the key points of contention was the Gnostic view of creation. While Orthodox Christianity held that the world was created by a benevolent and omnipotent God, Gnostics claimed that the material world was the creation of a lower, ignorant deity, the Demiurge, who mistakenly believed himself to be the ultimate God. This starkly dualistic worldview was seen as a threat to Christian teachings about the goodness of creation and the incarnation of Christ as both fully divine and fully human. Persecution of Gnostics became more pronounced as the institutional church solidified its power, and by the 4th century, Gnostic sects had largely been driven underground or destroyed. The destruction of Gnostic texts and the suppression of their teachings meant that much of what we know about Gnosticism comes from the writings of their opponents. For centuries, Gnosticism was relegated to the status of long-forgotten heresy. However, in 1945, a major discovery changed the course of Gnostic studies. The Nag Hammadi Library, a collection of 13 codices containing 52 texts, was unearthed near the town of Nag Hammadi in Egypt. This discovery included previously unknown Gnostic scriptures, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Apocryphon of John, providing scholars with direct access to Gnostic thought. These texts revealed the richness and diversity of Gnostic beliefs, as well as their deep engagement with the religious and philosophical questions of their time. The Nag Hammadi discovery also highlighted the significant influence that Gnosticism had on early Christian thought. While Gnosticism was eventually marginalized and declared heretical, it contributed to important theological debates in the early centuries of Christianity. The struggle between Orthodox Christian teachings and Gnostic ideas helped shape the development of key Christian doctrines, particularly regarding the nature of God, creation, and salvation. The historical and cultural context in which Gnosticism emerged was one of profound existential questioning. The ancient world was a place of political turmoil, social fragmentation, and religious plurality. The collapse of traditional city-state structures and the rise of large empires had created a sense of dislocation among many people. The search for meaning in such a fractured world led to a growing interest in mystery religions, philosophical schools, and esoteric teachings, all of which promised to provide answers to life's most pressing questions. Why do we suffer? What is the nature of the divine? How can we attain salvation? Gnosticism, with its emphasis on direct personal knowledge of the divine, offered an appealing answer to these questions. It provided a sense of cosmic order in a chaotic world, explaining human suffering as a result of a flawed creation rather than as a punishment for sin. Moreover, Gnosticism promised a path to transcendence, not through external rituals or adherence to religious law, but through inner awakening and spiritual knowledge. In this sense, Gnosticism can be seen as part of a broader spiritual crisis in the ancient world, in which individuals sought to find personal salvation and meaning beyond the traditional religious structures of their time. By offering a deeply personal and mystical approach to the divine, Gnosticism resonated with those who felt alienated from mainstream religious and social institutions. At the heart of Gnostic belief is a dualistic view of the universe in which the material world and the spiritual realm are in stark opposition. Central to this worldview is the concept of two gods, a supreme unknowable god and a lower false god known as the Demiurge. Understanding the nature of these two beings is crucial to comprehending Gnostic theology and its perspective on salvation. In Gnostic cosmology, the true God is entirely transcendent, ineffable, and beyond the comprehension of human beings. This supreme deity, sometimes referred to as the monad or the one, is the source of all that exists, yet it is not directly involved in the creation or governance of this material world. The monad is often described in abstract negative terms, what it is not, because it exists beyond the limitations of human language and understanding. It is the fullness of divine light, also known as the pleroma, and it emanates other divine beings known as aeons, which are aspects of the divine essence. In stark contrast to the true God is the Demiurge, a subordinate and ignorant deity who believes himself to be the ultimate creator. The Demiurge, often identified with the God of the Old Testament, is responsible for creating the material world and human beings. However, because he is blind to the higher spiritual realities, the world he creates is deeply flawed and corrupt. In Gnostic texts, the Demiurge is often portrayed as arrogant, ignorant, and even malevolent, trapping human souls in the physical world, where they are subjected to suffering, death, and ignorance. This distinction between the supreme God and the Demiurge is central to Gnostic thought and reflects the movement's profound distrust of the material world. While the Demiurge creates a world filled with pain, suffering, and illusion, the true God remains distant, concerned only with the spiritual salvation of humanity. Gnostics believe that the material world is a prison for the soul, and the Demiurge is its warden, keeping humanity in bondage to physical desires, limitations, and ignorance. In Gnostic mythology, the creation of the Demiurge often results from a cosmic error. One of the lower aeons, typically Sophia, which means wisdom, seeks to understand the unknowable monad, and in doing so falls from the divine realm. Her fall gives birth to the Demiurge, who, unaware of his divine origins, fashions the material world in ignorance. Sophia's fall and redemption become central themes in Gnostic cosmology, symbolizing the human soul's journey from ignorance to enlightenment. For Gnostics, salvation does not come through faith in doctrines, religious rituals, or obedience to a higher power. Instead, it comes through gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of the divine. This gnosis reveals the true nature of reality, that the material world is an illusion, and the soul's true home is a spiritual realm. The acquisition of this hidden knowledge allows the individual to transcend the material world and return to the divine source. Gnosis is not simply intellectual knowledge, but an inner awakening, a realization of the divine spark within. Gnostics believe that every human being contains a fragment of the divine, a spark trapped within the physical body by the Demiurge. This spark is a remnant of the pleroma, and through gnosis, the soul can remember its origins and seek liberation from the material realm. The Gnostic path to salvation, therefore, is highly individualistic. Each soul must undertake its own journey of self-discovery, enlightenment, and spiritual ascent. The role of religious leaders or institutions is minimal in this process, as they are often seen as complicit in the material world's deception. Instead, the soul's journey is guided by divine intermediaries or messengers, such as the figure of Christ in certain Gnostic traditions. Gnostics reinterpret the role of Christ in their soteriology, which is the study of salvation. Rather than being a savior who redeems humanity through his death and resurrection, as in Orthodox Christian teachings, Christ is viewed as a divine emissary sent from the Pleroma to awaken humanity to the truth of their spiritual nature. His role is to impart hidden knowledge to those who are ready to receive it, not to atone for sin. In many Gnostic texts, Jesus is seen as a revealer of wisdom and exposes the false nature of the material world and guides souls toward Gnosis. This emphasis on hidden knowledge leads to the Gnostic practice of secrecy. Gnostic teachings were often considered too profound or dangerous for the masses, and initiates were only gradually introduced to deeper layers of esoteric knowledge. The path to Gnosis is seen as a gradual awakening, requiring inner transformation and purification. The Gnostic worldview is profoundly dualistic, distinguishing between the spiritual realm of light and truth and the material realm of darkness and deception. This dualism is both metaphysical and moral, with the material world representing ignorance, suffering, and evil, while the spiritual world is the domain of knowledge, freedom, and divine light. The material world created by the Demiurge is viewed as a false and corrupt reality that entraps the soul. Physical existence is not seen as a gift or a test, as in many other religious traditions, but as a prison from which the soul must escape. The Gnostic goal is not to redeem or sanctify the world, but to transcend it entirely. This perspective leads to a disdain for the physical body, which is viewed as a temporary vessel that holds the divine spark in bondage. Gnostic teachings emphasize the importance of turning away from the illusions of the material world and seeking knowledge of the true spiritual realm. This involves rejecting the desires, attachments, and distractions of the physical world, which only serve to bind the soul more tightly to the Demiurge's creation. In many Gnostic sects, this rejection of the material world manifests in ascetic practices such as fasting, celibacy, and withdrawal from worldly pursuits. By renouncing the body's needs and desires, the Gnostic seeks to purify the soul and prepare it for the journey back to the Pleroma. However, not all Gnostic groups embraced asceticism. Some adopted more libertine attitudes, believing that since the material world was ultimately irrelevant, physical actions had no bearing on the soul's salvation. This radical dualism also extends to Gnostic ethics. While Gnostics often rejected conventional morality, which they saw as part of the Demiurge's control, they advocated for an inner purity of the soul. The path to Gnosis was not about external behavior, but about an inner transformation, an awakening to the truth that transcends material concerns. For some Gnostics, this meant a rejection of worldly power and authority, including religious institutions, which were viewed as tools of the Demiurge. Gnostic cosmology offers a profound symbolic explanation of the universe's structure and the nature of divine existence. At the heart of Gnostic thought is the concept of the Pleroma, which means fullness in Greek. The Pleroma is the realm of divine light, where the true God resides, and it is the ultimate source of all spiritual reality. Within the Pleroma, there exists a series of divine entities known as aeons, which are emanations or aspects of the divine. These aeons are not deities in the traditional sense, but rather expressions of the infinite facets of the one true God. They represent various divine qualities such as love, wisdom, truth, and grace. In many Gnostic texts, the aeons are depicted as forming syzygies, or male-female pairs, reflecting a divine balance of masculine and feminine energies. The entire structure of the Pleroma can be understood as a hierarchy of divine emanations, which, with each aeon existing as a lesser manifestation of the ineffable God. One of the central figures in Gnostic mythology is the Aeon Sophia, whose name means wisdom. Sophia's role in Gnostic cosmology is crucial, as her actions lead to the creation of the material world and the emergence of the Demiurge. Sophia, in her desire to know and experience the fullness of the true God, attempts to create something independently, outside of the divine order of the Pleroma. This results in her fall from the Pleroma and the birth of the Demiurge, an imperfect being who creates the material universe in ignorance of the higher spiritual reality. Sophia's fall and redemption are central to many Gnostic texts, symbolizing the human soul's own journey from ignorance to gnosis. In some Gnostic systems, the material world is a direct consequence of Sophia's error, and human souls are fragments of her divine essence, trapped in the physical world and longing to return to the Pleroma. The theme of divine exile and eventual restoration resonates throughout Gnostic mythology, with Sophia serving as a symbol of both the divine spark within humanity and the possibility of spiritual redemption. The material world, according to Gnostic belief, is a flawed and corrupted creation, far removed from the purity and perfection of the Pleroma. This world was not created by the true God, but by the Demiurge, a lower, ignorant deity who mistakenly believes himself to be the ultimate power in the universe. The Demiurge is often identified as the God of the Old Testament, whose actions and commandments Gnostics interpreted as evidence of his ignorance and tyranny. In Gnostic mythology, the Demiurge is born from Sophia's fall, and because he is created outside the Pleroma, he is ignorant of the higher divine reality. Believing himself to be the only God, the Demiurge creates the material universe and traps human souls within physical bodies. This world is seen as a place of suffering, illusion, and death, where the divine spark within each human being is buried under layers of ignorance and materiality. The Demiurge's role is not only as the creator of the material world, but also as its ruler and oppressor. He is often portrayed as a figure of arrogance and cruelty, intent on keeping humanity in bondage to the material realm. In many Gnostic texts, the Demiurge is assisted by lesser beings called archons, who serve as his enforcers, maintaining the illusion of the material world and preventing souls from attaining gnosis. While the Demiurge is a central figure in Gnostic cosmology, his power is ultimately limited. Though he may control the material world, he is still a subordinate being, far removed from the true God and the Pleroma. The goal of Gnostic salvation is to escape the Demiurge's dominion and return to the divine source, a process that begins with the acquisition of gnosis, or spiritual knowledge. One of the most distinct aspects of Gnostic belief is its view of humanity. According to Gnosticism, human beings are not simply physical creatures living in a material world. They are spiritual beings, divine in essence, but trapped in the prison of the physical body. Within each person lies a divine spark, a fragment of the true God that has become entangled in the material world. This divine spark is a remnant of the Pleroma, and its presence in the human soul is what allows for the possibility of salvation. In Gnostic anthropology, humanity is divided into three categories based on their spiritual potential: the hylics, the psychics, and the pneumatics. Hylics are those who are completely materialistic, living their lives unaware of the divine spark within them. Psychics are individuals who are aware of spiritual matters, but remain attached to the material world. Pneumatics are those who possess gnosis and are destined to return to the Pleroma. This tripartite division underscores the Gnostic belief that only a select few possess the spiritual capacity to achieve salvation, while others remain trapped in ignorance. The divine spark within each person is not automatically activated. It must be awakened through gnosis, the direct experiential knowledge of the divine. This gnosis allows individuals to recognize their true spiritual nature and begin the process of liberation from the material world. The awakening of the divine spark is often described as a process of anamnesis, or remembering. Gnostics believe that the soul's true home is the pleroma, and that human suffering and ignorance are the result of forgetfulness. Through gnosis, the soul remembers its divine origin and begins the journey back to the pleroma. This concept of the divine spark also influences Gnostic views on human suffering and evil. In many Gnostic texts, suffering is not seen as a result of personal sin or divine punishment, but as the inevitable consequence of being trapped in a corrupt and illusory world. The material world is not simply flawed, but fundamentally hostile to the soul, designed to keep humanity ignorant of its true nature. Salvation, therefore, is not about overcoming sin, but about transcending the material world and its limitations. In Gnostic tradition, Christ plays a central role in the process of salvation, but his function and nature are significantly different from those found in Orthodox Christian doctrine. For Gnostics, Christ is not primarily a savior who dies to atone for humanity's sins, but a revealer, a divine emissary sent from the pleroma to awaken the divine spark within human souls. Christ's mission is to bring gnosis to those who are capable of receiving it, guiding them towards the knowledge that will lead to their liberation. In many Gnostic systems, Christ is not a purely human figure, but a spiritual being, sometimes referred to as the Logos or the Redeemer. His physical appearance on earth is often seen as a temporary manifestation, a way of communicating with human beings without becoming fully entangled in the material world. Some Gnostic sects even reject the idea of Christ's physical incarnation altogether, suggesting that he appeared only in a spiritual form, an idea known as dosutism. Christ's role in Gnosticism is not to suffer and die for humanity's sins, as in mainstream Christian theology, but to reveal the hidden truth of the divine spark and the illusion of the material world. In some Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Judas and the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus' teachings focus on esoteric knowledge rather than moral instruction. He guides his disciples toward understanding their own divine nature and falsehoods perpetuated by the Demiurge and the material world. The figure of Christ also serves as a model for the Gnostic initiate. Just as Christ descends from the pleroma to reveal divine knowledge, so too must the Gnostic initiate seek to rise above the material world and attain gnosis. In this sense, Christ represents the archetypal Gnostic savior, a guide and teacher who points the way to spiritual liberation. The ultimate goal of Gnostic spirituality is the return of the soul to the pleroma, the realm of divine light. This process of redemption is not a future event, but an inner journey that each soul must undertake. Salvation in Gnosticism is deeply personal, involving the individual's recognition of their divine origin and their conscious rejection of the material world. Through gnosis, the soul is freed from ignorance and begins its ascent back to the pleroma. This ascent is often described in metaphorical terms as a journey through the spheres, or layers of material cosmos, each ruled by archons who seek to prevent the soul's escape. The Gnostic initiate must overcome these archons, often through secret knowledge or spiritual passwords, in order to reach the divine realm. This imagery reflects the Gnostic belief that salvation is a process of overcoming the obstacles and illusions imposed by the material world. Once the soul has gained gnosis and escaped the material world, it returns to the pleroma, where it is reunited with the divine source. In some Gnostic systems, this return is seen as a reintegration into the fullness of the divine, while in others it is described as a restoration of the soul's individual identity in its true spiritual form. Regardless of the specifics, the central theme is one of restoration, the soul's return to its original divine state, free from the corruption and ignorance of the material world. Now, the relationship between Gnosticism and early Christianity is very complex, marked by both overlap and conflict. Gnosticism emerged in the first centuries of the Common Era, a time when various religious and philosophical ideas were blending across the Mediterranean and Near East. Early Christianity, especially in its formative years, shared many of the same philosophical currents, cultural concerns, and theological debates with Gnostic groups. Both movements were rooted in Hellenistic thought, Jewish esoteric traditions, and the broader spiritual quest for understanding the divine and salvation. Gnosticism was not a monolithic system, but a diverse set of beliefs and sects. Some Gnostic groups saw themselves as Christians, and in fact Gnosticism likely developed alongside early Christian thought. Many Gnostics revered Jesus as a divine figure or revealer of Gnosis, albeit in a very different way from Orthodox Christians. Gnostic texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas, and the Apocryphon of John interpret Jesus' teachings in mystical, esoteric terms, emphasizing hidden knowledge rather than faith in the resurrection or atonement for sin. Gnostics reinterpreted the role of Jesus as a divine emissary who came not to die for humanity's sins, but to reveal the true nature of the cosmos and the spiritual reality beyond it. This view of Jesus as a revealer of secret knowledge placed Gnostic Christians in conflict with the emerging Orthodox Christian community, which emphasized the centrality of Jesus' crucifixion and the resurrection for salvation. However, there was also significant overlap in their early development. Many Gnostic ideas about the soul, the material world, and the nature of God can be found in early Christian writings, though they are interpreted differently. Gnosticism represents an alternative Christian worldview, one that emphasizes personal spiritual experience over adherence to doctrine, direct knowledge over faith, and liberation from the material world over the resurrection of the body. As Christianity developed into a more organized and institutionalized religion, Gnosticism became increasingly marginalized. Early Christian leaders such as Irenaeus, Tertullian, and Hippolytus denounced Gnosticism as heretical, viewing it as a dangerous distortion of Christian teachings. The Gnostic emphasis on hidden knowledge and the rejection of the material world clashed with the emerging Christian orthodoxy, which taught that salvation was available to all through faith in Christ, and that the material world, though fallen, was part of God's creation and plan. One of the earliest and most important critiques of Gnosticism came from Irenaeus of Lyons, who wrote his monumental work Against Heresies in the late 2nd century. Irenaeus' work is one of the primary sources for understanding Gnostic belief, as much of the original Gnostic literature was suppressed by the Church and later lost until rediscovery in the 20th century at Nag Hammadi. Irenaeus attacked Gnosticism on several grounds. He argued that Gnostic teachings were elitist, claiming that salvation was only available to those who possessed secret knowledge, while Orthodox Christianity taught that salvation was open to all through Christ. He also rejected the Gnostic cosmology that viewed the material world as evil and the Demiurge as a false god. For Irenaeus, the God of the Old and New Testaments was one and the same, and the material world, though corrupted by sin, was inherently good because it was created by the true God. Tertullian and Hippolytus also wrote extensively against Gnostic groups, particularly focusing on the perceived moral and doctrinal dangers of Gnostic thought. Tertullian, in particular, attacked the Gnostic rejection of the resurrection of the body, which was a core belief in early Christianity. For the Gnostics, the material body was a prison for the soul, and salvation meant escaping it, whereas for Orthodox Christians, the resurrection affirmed the ultimate redemption of the whole person, both body and soul. These early Christian critiques helped to solidify the boundaries of what would become orthodoxy, and Gnosticism was increasingly pushed to the margins. By the 4th century, after Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire under Constantine, Gnosticism was largely suppressed, and many of its texts were destroyed or hidden. Despite the suppression of Gnostic ideas, several Gnostic Christian texts were survived, offering valuable insights into the diverse beliefs and practices of Gnostic communities. Many of these texts were discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a major archaeological find that radically transformed our understanding of early Gnosticism and its relationship to Christianity. One of the most important Gnostic Christian texts is the Gospel of Thomas, a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which focus on Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, the Gospel of Thomas emphasizes the secret teachings of Jesus. Many of the sayings reflect a mystical inward path to salvation, with Jesus instructing his disciples to seek the divine light within themselves. The famous saying, "The kingdom of God is within you," captures this inward focus, emphasizing personal gnosis over external religious practices or beliefs. Another significant text is the Gospel of Judas, which presents a radically different view of Judas Iscariot. In this text, Judas is not the betrayer of Jesus, but his closest disciple, the one who truly understands Jesus' mission. Jesus reveals to Judas the mysteries of the cosmos, explaining the false nature of the material world and the role of the Demiurge. This reinterpretation of Judas challenges the traditional Christian narrative and underscores the Gnostic emphasis on hidden esoteric knowledge. The Apocryphon of John is another key Gnostic text that provides a detailed account of Gnostic cosmology. It describes the creation of the world by the Demiurge, the fall of Sophia, and the divine sparks trapped within humanity. This text serves as a foundational myth for many Gnostic sects, explaining the origins of the material world and the path to salvation through gnosis. These texts reveal the diversity of early Christian thought and demonstrate that Gnosticism was not a marginal or insignificant movement, but a vibrant and influential strand of early Christianity. The fact that these texts were hidden and preserved for centuries speaks to the importance of Gnostic teachings for those who rejected the emerging Orthodox consensus. One of the most influential Gnostic movements within early Christianity was the Valentinian school, founded by Valentinus, an early Christian theologian who lived in the 2nd century. Valentinus was a prominent figure in early Christianity and nearly became a bishop in Rome before his teachings were declared heretical. His school of thought, however, continued to thrive for several centuries, and Valentinian Gnosticism represents one of the most sophisticated and influential expressions of Gnostic Christianity. Valentinian theology blends Gnostic cosmology with Christian soteriology, offering a complex vision of the relationship between the divine and material worlds. In Valentinian thought, the pleroma is populated by aeons, divine emanations of the true God, and the material world is the result of a cosmic tragedy involving the fall of Sophia. However, Valentinian Gnosticism also emphasizes the role of Christ as a redeemer, sent by the true God to awaken the divine spark within humanity and guide souls back to the pleroma. One of the distinctive features of Valentinian Gnosticism is its more optimistic view of the material world. While the material world is still considered flawed, Valentinus taught that it could be redeemed, and that the physical body had a role to play in the process of salvation. This more moderate position allowed Valentinian Gnosticism to appeal to a broader Christian audience, and for a time it existed alongside Orthodox Christian communities. Valentinus and his followers also developed a complex sacramental system, which included rites of initiation and spiritual ascent. These sacraments were seen as means of awakening the divine spark and preparing the soul for its journey back to the pleroma. Valentinian Gnosticism thus offered a spiritual path that combined mystical knowledge with ritual practice, making it one of the most enduring forms of Gnostic Christianity. By the 4th century, the rise of imperial Christianity under Constantine and the establishment of the Nicene Creed marked the beginning of the end for Gnostic Christianity as a widespread movement. The Church increasingly centralized its authority, and heterodox beliefs like Gnosticism were actively persecuted. Gnostic texts were destroyed, and Gnostic communities were either absorbed into the broader Christian Church or forced into secrecy. However, the suppression of Gnosticism did not mean the end of Gnostic ideas. Many of the themes central to Gnosticism, such as the emphasis on personal spiritual experience, the critique of institutional religion, and the belief in a higher transcendental reality, continue to influence Christian mysticism and various esoteric traditions throughout the Middle Ages and beyond. Gnosticism's rejection of materialism and its vision of spiritual liberation would later find echoes in movements such as Manichaeism, Catharism, and Renaissance Hermeticism. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945 reignited scholarly interest in Gnosticism, revealing the richness and diversity of Gnostic thought. These texts have not only reshaped our understanding of early Christianity, but have also inspired contemporary spiritual movements that seek to revive Gnostic ideas in the modern world. Although Gnosticism faced suppression and decline following the establishment of Orthodox Christianity, its influence persisted, especially within the broader streams of Western esotericism. Gnostic ideas did not vanish entirely, but were absorbed and reinterpreted within other mystical and esoteric movements that flourished during late antiquity and the early Middle Ages. One key movement that preserved Gnostic-like ideas was Manichaeism, founded by the prophet Mani in the 3rd century CE. Manichaeism, while not strictly a Gnostic religion, shared many Gnostic themes, such as the dualistic struggle between light and darkness and the notion of a divine spark trapped within the material world. Mani saw himself as the final prophet in a line that included figures like Jesus and the Buddha, and his teachings spread throughout the Roman Empire, Persia, and even into China. Like the Gnostics, Manichaeans believed in the need for knowledge, or gnosis, to liberate the soul from the material world. Another significant legacy of Gnosticism during this period is seen in the rise of Neoplatonism, especially through the works of philosophers like Plotinus and Proclus. Neoplatonism, though distinct from Gnosticism, shared its emphasis on the spiritual realm as the true reality and the material world as a fallen or inferior copy. Plotinus, while critical of the Gnostics' disdain for the material world, also engaged with their ideas, particularly around the relationship between the One, or the ultimate source of reality, and the emanations that flow from it, which closely resemble the Gnostic idea of divine emanations from the pleroma. Neoplatonism's focus on the ascent of the soul through various spiritual realms influenced later Christian mysticism and would have a lasting impact on Western esoteric traditions, particularly during the Renaissance. In addition, the influence of Gnosticism can be seen in early Christian mysticism, particularly through the works of figures like Origen and Gregory of Nyssa, who developed ideas about the soul's purification and ascent toward God, echoing the Gnostic emphasis on transcending the material world. Although these church fathers did not share the Gnostic disdain for the material world as inherently evil, their writings show an engagement with the idea that the soul's ultimate goal is union with the divine, achieved through inner transformation and knowledge. During the Middle Ages, Gnostic ideas re-emerged in various heretical movements, most notably the Cathars, a Christian dualist sect that flourished in southern France and northern Italy during the 12th and 13th centuries. The Cathars, like the Gnostics, believed in a dualistic cosmology, positing the existence of two opposing forces: a good god who ruled the spiritual realm and an evil god, often associated with the God of the Old Testament, who created and governed the material world. The Cathars rejected the authority of the Catholic Church, viewing it as an institution corrupted by the material world and by the evil Demiurge. They believed that human souls were divine sparks trapped in physical bodies, and that salvation could only be achieved through rejecting the material world and living a life of extreme asceticism. Cathar perfects, or spiritual leaders, followed strict rules of celibacy, vegetarianism, and non-violence, seeking to purify themselves and return to the divine source. The Cathars' Gnostic-like belief brought them into direct conflict with the Catholic Church, which viewed their teachings as heretical. The Albigensian crusade of the early 13th century was launched to eradicate Catharism, and by the mid-14th century the movement had been largely destroyed. However, the dualistic cosmology and the rejection of institutional religion present in Catharism are clear echoes of earlier Gnostic thought, and the Cathars' radical reinterpretation of Christianity would later inspire other mystical and esoteric movements. The Renaissance marked a revival of interest in ancient esoteric traditions, including Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and Hermeticism. During this period, scholars and mystics rediscovered and translated many ancient texts, sparking a renewed interest in hidden knowledge, divine wisdom, and the nature of the cosmos. Two esoteric traditions in particular, Hermeticism and Kabbalah, demonstrate the continued influence of Gnostic ideas during the Renaissance. Hermeticism, based on a collection of texts attributed to the mythical figure Hermes Trismegistus, taught a vision of the universe that shared many similarities with Gnosticism. Hermetic texts describe a hierarchical cosmos in which the divine emanates from various levels of reality, with human beings trapped in the material world but possessing the potential for spiritual ascent through gnosis. The Corpus Hermeticum, rediscovered and translated into Latin by Marsilio Ficino in the 15th century, provided Renaissance thinkers with a new framework for understanding the relationship between the material and spiritual worlds. Like the Gnostics, Hermeticists believed in the importance of direct personal knowledge of the divine and viewed the physical world as a lesser realm from which the soul must ascend. However, unlike Gnosticism, Hermeticism often had a more positive view of the material world, seeing it as a manifestation of divine order rather than as a prison. Another key esoteric tradition influenced by Gnostic ideas during the Renaissance was Kabbalah, the mystical branch of Judaism. While Kabbalah has its roots in early Jewish mystical traditions, its development in medieval Spain and later in Renaissance Italy was influenced by Gnostic and Neoplatonic ideas. The Kabbalistic concept of the spherots, a series of divine emanations that form the structure of the cosmos, parallels the Gnostic idea of the pleroma, and the Kabbalistic focus on the soul's journey toward union with the divine reflects Gnostic themes of spiritual ascent. The Christian Kabbalah, developed by figures like Giovanni Pico degli Mirandola and Johannes Reichlin, sought to integrate Kabbalistic ideas with Christian theology. In doing so, it adopted many Gnostic themes, such as the belief in the divine spark within humanity and the idea that the material world is a reflection of higher spiritual truths. Christian Kabbalists believed that through studying the mystical structures of the universe, one could achieve direct knowledge of God and participate in the divine plan. Gnosticism's influence on Western esotericism did not end with the Renaissance. In fact, the modern occult revival of the 19th and 20th centuries saw a renewed interest in Gnostic ideas, particularly within the context of Theosophy, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and modern occultism. Theosophy, founded by Helena Blavatsky in the late 19th century, incorporated many Gnostic elements into its system of spiritual evolution and hidden knowledge. Blavatsky's writings, such as The Secret Doctrine, emphasize the existence of a higher spiritual reality beyond the material world and the need for esoteric wisdom to achieve spiritual liberation. The Theosophical Society, which blended Eastern and Western mystical traditions, echoed the Gnosticism's critique of institutional religion and its focus on personal gnosis as the path to salvation. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a late 19th century occult society, also drew upon Gnostic ideas in its magical and mystical teachings. The Golden Dawn incorporated elements of Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and Gnosticism into its rituals and cosmology, viewing the spiritual path as a journey of awakening to higher knowledge and liberating the divine spark within. Many of the Golden Dawn's practices, including its rituals and initiation and ascent through the spiritual realms, reflected Gnostic themes of spiritual liberation and union with the divine. In the 20th century, Carl Jung, the influential psychologist, also engaged with Gnostic ideas, seeing them as a symbolic representation of the psyche's inner processes. Jung viewed Gnosticism not only as a religious movement, but as a profound exploration of the human experience of inner knowledge and transformation. His writings on the archetypes of the collective and conscious often drew parallels to Gnostic myths, particularly the idea of divine fragments trapped within the human soul. In recent decades, Gnosticism has experienced a revival in contemporary spirituality, often referred to as Neo-Gnosticism. This modern movement encompasses the wide range of groups and individuals who seek to reclaim Gnostic themes for the modern world, often blending them with New Age beliefs, Eastern mysticism, and the modern psychological insights. Many contemporary spiritual seekers are drawn to Gnosticism's emphasis on personal spiritual experience, direct knowledge of the divine, and the critique of institutionalized religion. Neo-Gnostic movements often present themselves as alternatives to mainstream Christianity, offering a more mystical and individualized approach to spirituality. Groups like the Ecclesia Gnostica and the Gnostic Church of Christ represent modern iterations of Gnostic Christianity, while figures like Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy have popularized Gnostic themes in their writings on early Christianity and mysticism. Neo-Gnosticism often reinterprets traditional Gnostic myths in a modern context, presenting the Demiurge as a metaphor for the oppressive systems of power and the material world as a symbol of spiritual ignorance. The divine spark within humanity is seen as the potential for self-realization and inner transformation, and Gnosis is understood as the direct, intuitive knowledge of one's true spiritual nature. Finally, Gnostic ideas have found their way into popular culture, particularly in science fiction, fantasy, and the dystopian narratives. Films like The Matrix and The Truman Show explore Gnostic themes of awakening to a hidden reality, questioning the nature of the material world, and seeking liberation from an illusory or oppressive system. In these narratives, the protagonists often serve as Gnostic figures, discovering that the world they inhabit is a false construct and seeking knowledge of a higher truth. Books such as Philip K. Dick's Valis and The Divine Invasion also delve into Gnostic themes, with the author himself being influenced by Gnostic concepts in his exploration of reality, divine intervention, and the nature of human consciousness. Dick's characters often experience moments of gnosis where they perceive the world's true nature beyond the illusion of everyday life. These modern interpretations of Gnosticism reveal the continued relevance of Gnostic ideas in contemporary thought, as individuals and creators seek to explore questions of identity, knowledge, and liberation in an increasingly complex world. Gnosticism, despite its suppression and marginalization by Orthodox Christianity, has left its mark on Western esotericism. Its central theme, the belief in a higher hidden reality, the conviction that divine knowledge or gnosis is the path to liberation, and its dualistic view of the material world as a prison for the soul, have resonated with mystics, philosophers, and seekers throughout history. From late antiquity to the present day, Gnostic ideas have been absorbed, adapted, and reinterpreted by various spiritual movements, shaping the development of Western esoteric thought. In the early centuries of Christianity, Gnostic sects challenged the emerging orthodoxy by offering alternative interpretations of the nature of God, the role of Jesus, and the purpose of human existence. Their texts and teachings, though largely lost or condemned, resurfaced in the 20th century with the discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library, sparking renewed interest in Gnosticism's spiritual and philosophical insights. Throughout history, Gnostic themes found new life in movements like Manichaeism, Neoplatonism, and the Cathars, as well as in the mystical traditions of Kabbalah and Hermeticism during the Renaissance. These traditions carried forward the Gnostic emphasis on direct, personal spiritual experience and the transcendence of the material world, even as they adapted these ideas to new cultural and religious contexts. In the modern era, Gnosticism has influenced a wide array of esoteric and occult movements, from Theosophy to the Golden Dawn, and has found expression in the works of thinkers like Carl Jung. Its dualistic cosmology, critique of institutionalized religion, and emphasis on the liberation of the divine spark have continued to appeal to individuals seeking spiritual alternatives to mainstream religious systems. The revival of Gnostic thought in the form of Neo-Gnosticism and its widespread influence in contemporary popular culture, science fiction, and philosophical discourse further attests to the enduring relevance of Gnosticism in the modern world. Gnostic themes of spiritual awakening, hidden knowledge, and the questioning of reality resonate with modern seekers, offering a framework for understanding the complexities of human existence and the quest for meaning in a fragmented, materialistic world. Ultimately, Gnosticism's journey from a marginalized religious movement to a cornerstone of Western esotericism highlights its timeless appeal. It speaks to the human desire for deeper understanding, the yearning for liberation from worldly constraints, and the pursuit of inner transformation through knowledge of the divine. In this way, Gnosticism continues to inspire, challenge, and illuminate the path of those who seek to uncover the mysteries of existence and attain true spiritual freedom. Alright, so let's have a look at some resources. I have added some books into a category on my Amazon storefront, as I always do. However, this is a very short list compared to the number of books on the actual topic. I constructed this list by checking various suggested reading lists and then comparing the more commonly recommended against the reading list on gnosis.org, which is a great site. I definitely recommend visiting that site. This has not been a main topic of interest for me through the years, so I have not read a majority of the books on the topic. But I think this short list should suffice for some good reading and trusted sources. Gnosticism was an interest very early on, but kind of fell away after a while. So these books that I'm going to mention do appear to be some of the best sources anyway. So first of all, the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, which is edited by Marvin Mayer. So this is a comprehensive collection of Gnostic texts discovered in Nag Hammadi, including essential works like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and the Apocryphon of John. Marvin Mayer's edition offers accessible translations and scholarly commentary. The next one, in fact, this author is very good, just overall, the Gnostic Gospels by Elaine Pagels, or Pagels, I'm not sure how to pronounce the surname. This is a classic in Gnostic studies. Pagels' book explores the early Christian Gnostic texts and theological implications, and why they were deemed heretical by Orthodox Christianity. Pagels also examines the role of women in Gnostic thought, offering a groundbreaking view into the suppressed aspect of early Christianity. Definitely go check that. Plus, it's just got various other books on the topics of Gnosticism and other various things. Very good reads though. Gnosis, The Nature and History of Gnosticism by Kurt Rudolph. This is a detailed and comprehensive academic introduction to the history and philosophy of Gnosticism. Rudolph's work covers the origins of Gnosticism, its various sects, and its influence on Western thought. This is a highly recommended scholarly resource for anyone looking for an in-depth understanding. And the Secret Revelation of John, translation and commentary by Karen L. King. This is an authoritative translation and interpretation of the Apocryphon of John, one of the most important Gnostic texts. Karen L. King provides insight into its theological concepts, especially the Gnostic creation myth and the role of the Demiurge. Then we have Beyond Belief, another one by Elaine Pagels. It's Beyond Belief, the Secret Gospel of Thomas. In this follow-up to the Gnostic Gospels, Pagels, I'm going to say Pagels, it sounds better. Pagels offers a closer examination of the Gospel of Thomas and its radical teachings, emphasizing the individual's search for spiritual enlightenment rather than reliance on religious authorities. Not in His Image, Gnostic Vision, Sacred Ecology, and the Future of Belief by John Lamb Lash. This work offers a modern take on Gnosticism, particularly focusing on how Gnostic principles can be applied to ecological and spiritual crises in the contemporary world. Lash explores how Gnosticism challenges conventional religious and philosophical systems. Right, so that's it for today. I do definitely recommend going to the website gnosis.org. It's got a lot of resources on there, and it's got a fantastic reading list. And as I said, it was just these are some of the main ones I decided to compare between various reading lists and this particular one from gnosis.com. .org. Yeah, go and check that out. I will leave the links to the Amazon storefront and that website in the description. There'll also be a link to the Amazon storefront up the top here in that little eye icon to one of the sides at the top. All right, so if you do want to go and purchase any of those paperbacks, I do appreciate that. I do earn a small commission. It's a very small commission, but it's at least something, and that goes towards getting more books to review on this channel. All right. So yeah, thank you for watching, and see you next time. Cheers for now. Bye bye.